welcome to You Make the Difference. I'm Wanda Scarborough, and I have as my guest today Randy Nix. Randy Nix serves as our local representative in the Georgia House of Representatives, and he's also a local pastor. He pastors Hillcrest United Methodist Church.
Yes.
And you're a businessman too, right, Randy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As you describe me, I guess I have to tell people I'm not sure what I'm going to be when I grow up, but I do all those things.
Yeah, and you're doing very well.
Thank
I also want to say that Randy belongs to the Troop Transformation Leadership Team, and he represents government on our team. And we have done some really great things with Randy leading us in government. I want to ask you, Randy, how did you get interested in becoming a Georgia representative?
I had always been interested in politics and in the process, but I'd never actually been involved. I got somewhat involved when I moved to Georgia. We moved to Georgia in '94, and I got involved with Jeff Brown and his campaign and helped him and got to know him. And then when Jeff fairly suddenly decided not to run, I asked him, I said, what do you think about me running? And he said, well, I don't think it would be a bad thing. He said, you've never run for office before, and I think there's some other people who are in politics now who may run. It would be difficult for you. So this was right before qualification week. And I said, okay, I'll just kind of wait. And as it worked out, it was kind of like I said, a divine appointment.
Yes.
Because on Tuesday night of qualification week, the person he thought was going to run actually called me and said they would support me if I would run.
Wow.
And another person he thought might run called and said, I'll support you if you'll run.
Wow.
And then Jeff said he would support me. So it was one of those things, I really wasn't looking for it. It was just kind of one of those target of opportunity things that came along, and things just kind of fell into place after that.
Yeah. It's like once we make that decision, the Lord just opens the doors, doesn't he?
That's the way it seemed.
Yeah.
It really did.
And he also closed some doors in that situation. Well,
Yeah.
what has been something that's pleasantly surprised you as a legislator?
I guess the thing that probably more than anything surprised me pleasantly was the fact that the system works. The legislative system works. When we're on the outside looking in at legislation being made, it looks like a real chaotic process, and sometimes we get real frustrated because we have a very strong opinion that this is the way it's got to be done. Well, once you're in there working with people, you realize in the House of Representatives there are 180 people, and most of them have very strong opinions.
Yes.
And very seldom they all have the same strong opinion. So as you go through the process of introducing legislation, you begin to get input from all of those people. It's the old thing about, you don't want to see how the sausage is made because it's really, sometimes it's pretty ugly and all, but with the checks and balances we have, by the time you take a piece of legislation, you get it through the House committees, you get it passed on the floor of the House, then it's got to go to the Senate. There are 56 senators, and a lot of times they're going to slice and dice it, and they're going to have their imprint on it. Then you get them to pass it. A lot of times they pass something that's even different than the House, and then you have to come back and have a committee to get those two worked out.
Yes.
And then once you do that, if both sides pass it, then it's got to go to the governor. So you've got so many different people who have a look at it. Now, I don't always agree with what they do to the legislation I start out with, but we've got to realize that there are people with different opinions. There are representatives who represent a significantly different constituency to what I have.
Yes.
So while I thought I was going up there with all the good ideas, I found out not necessarily were mine all the good ideas. There are other people with good ideas, and sometimes you kind of have to mesh those together to get the very best product in terms of legislation. My good friend Ed Lindsay up there says, politics is the art of the possible.
Yes. And I was wondering, I know y'all have so many things that you look at, and just looking at one piece of legislation sometimes can be overwhelming. And so, I was thinking, how do you process that many pieces of legislation in such a short period of time and feel comfortable that you're voting in the right way? And I guess that's the process, isn't it?
That is the process, and when you talk about the amount of legislation, usually in a session, and a session is actually 2 years, there's 1,200 to 1,500 pieces of legislation introduced. Now, fortunately, a lot of those never even come out of committee. They never come up. But the ones that do, there's usually maybe 300 or 400 of those that will actually come up for a vote. And you can't know all of them intimately. That's where your relationships with other people. If you know the committee chair who has that piece of legislation, you go and talk to them and say, look, this is a 200-page bill. What's really in it? Help me figure this out.
Yes.
And you have to develop those relationships because you cannot personally and physically read every one of them and know every little nuance in there. So you have to develop those relationships with people that you can trust who will know their legislation very well, just like you know your own legislation. And you have to have some trust, especially when you get down to the final moments of the session when these things are coming at you real fast.
Yes.
They've been to a conference committee, some things have been changed, and there's just no way in the world to know it. You've got to have those relationships with people you trust to say, help me, is this going to be good for us? And you've got to be able to trust them.
So each year when the House is in session, how many hours would you say that you put into the session? Like it starts in...
Starts on the second Monday of January.
And ends in...
Well, it's a 40 work-day session.
Yeah.
So this year we actually ended in March. That's the first time in my 6 years we've ended that early. It's usually somewhere out in April to maybe into mid-April. But it's 40 legislative days. So we may go the first week and go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, have 5 days. The next week we may go in one day and then have committee hearings for 2 or 3 days, and those committee hearing days don't count.
Yes.
So that may just add one more day, so you've only done 6 days in 2 weeks. So it's the number of days you're actually in session. That's why the 40 days sometimes takes 3 to 3.5 months.
Yeah.
But once the session gets going, the days get quite long. Usually there's a meeting at anywhere from 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. A lot of times we'll be in session and we'll come out, we'll have committee meetings, and they may run till 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Then there are usually meetings after that. Sometimes they're early morning meetings. So during the session itself, a 12-hour day is a normal day, and sometimes there's 16, 17, 18-hour days.
Wow. Now, what has been the most disappointing thing that you have found as a legislator?
I think the thing that's been most disappointing to me is that somehow there's an assumption by so many people that just because you've been elected to an office that there's something flawed about you. Obviously you're unethical, or you've got the wrong motivation or something. I mean, I'm no different today than I was 7 years ago before I was elected.
Yes.
But I've had some people that I considered to be my friends and be very close to me, who now look at me so totally different, as if I'm unethical, as if I'm taking bribes, it's just, I really can't explain it. I think it's just the psyche of the American people. I mean, it's driven by the press.
Yes.
When was the last time you saw the press pick out a legislator and write an article about the good things that they did? They don't do it. Their whole thing is to try to make a politician look bad. I've got a guy in Atlanta right now who's going through all my records trying to find something he can make me look bad on.
Huh.
But it was an extreme disappointment to me. I consider myself a servant leader and a public servant. I don't consider myself a politician.
Uh-huh.
But once you're elected, in some people's minds, you're a politician, and that is the lowest form of life in the entire world, no matter who you are or what you stand for or what you've done. Just because you've been elected, you suddenly become the lowest life form in the world, and that's very disappointing. It's not good for the system.
Yes. And also, it's not good for recruiting people to run and be a part of government, because, I mean, who wants their life just looked at under a microscope and everything brought out into the public?
Yeah.
So I'm sure it causes a lot of good people not to even consider stepping up and running.
Well, it's not so much that the facts would be brought out. I don't really have anything to hide, but it's the innuendo that, oh, well, this, there must be something wrong with this. You went to lunch with this person or whatever. Suddenly, there must be something really subversive here. You can't have a friend that there's not some subversive motivation.
Wow.
And it does. It causes a lot of good people to think twice about running, because it becomes very stressful just to get through the day when you've got so many people that you know that their whole purpose in life is try to figure out a way to make you look bad.
Wow.
And that's the way it is. The press in particular, they just cannot wait to try to find something to make a politician look bad.
Yes. Well, let's talk about your faith and politics. How does your faith play into what you do as a legislator?
Well, it's like I've told people so many times, I was a Christian a long time.
Yes.
A long time before I got into politics. I became a Christian when I was 9 years old. I ran for office when I was 54, so you figure out how much longer I've been a Christian than I've been a politician. So it has a very strong effect on who I am and what I do. Now, I don't believe that I need to go out and just absolutely force my beliefs on other people, but on the other side of the coin, I don't think that when I walk in the doors of the Capitol that I leave my faith outside.
Right.
My faith is going to drive, who I am in my decision making. I have grown up that way. I mean, I did it when I was in business. I do it in my personal relationships. So to think that suddenly I'm going to forget about my faith just because I've been elected to this office and I'm serving, I think is not realistic. And on the other side of that coin, I have been criticized by a number of people because of my faith and taking stands based on that. But I believe that the majority of the people that I represent, and that's what I do is represent them, I believe that they have a similar faith and or they at least respect my faith, because let's face it, every 2 years you have to be reelected to this office. And if people think that I'm making too much of my faith and they want to run somebody against me, or somebody says, I don't agree with that, I'm going to run because your faith is hindering what you do, then they can certainly go out there and make the case, and if enough people agree with them, then I'll be doing something else.
Yes. And I want to just touch on something that we had talked about before, and that is that it goes back to the previous question. You were talking about the people that are in the Georgia House of Representatives and how you feel that they are there for the right motives. And I know you said that you could count on one hand the ones that you felt weren't there for appropriate reasons. And I just wanted to make sure that we stated that, because it was good to hear that.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, even when I went up there, I had this idea that, there's so many people there that are very self-serving. There are some that are self-serving. There are some that disappoint you from time to time, even that you have a very favorable opinion of. But by and large, the people who are elected to serve are there for the right reason. They really want to do something good for their constituents, for the state of Georgia. They want to uphold the Constitution. They are there to try to make a better life for the people in their districts and the people of the state of Georgia. I truly believe that. One of the things that I'm involved in and always impresses me is every Wednesday morning during the session at 7 o'clock in the morning, we have a group of legislators, it's legislators only, who have a prayer group. We meet together, we have a devotional, we spend time in prayer for each other, for each other's needs, for the state of Georgia. And that group, some mornings, depending on how busy everybody is, there may be 10 or 12. Sometimes there may be 25 or 30. And the group changes from week to week. We've had the governor come and lead that.
Yes.
We've had senators, we've had representatives, we've had Democrats, we've had Republicans. So there is an element of faith there that people don't necessarily see because they don't really want to look for it. But for the most part, the people that are there, Republican, Democrat alike, I think they're there for the right reasons. Now, what we have to remember is they have different constituencies.
Yes.
Let's face it, most of the strong Democrat districts in the state of Georgia, I couldn't be elected in it if I wanted to, because they've got a different constituency, they've got different ideas about how things should be. But on the other side of the coin, they could never get elected in my district.
That's right.
That's why I said early on, you've got to include other people in your decision making, because there are differences of opinion. So because somebody has a different idea does not make them bad or wrong.
Right.
You've got to look at what they're trying to accomplish and why they're trying to do it. And for the most part, the people that I see are trying their best to represent their constituents, and they're doing what they feel is best for them. I don't always agree with that.
Yes.
And that's what makes things lively. But I think we have to face that fact, and for that reason, I just don't believe there are that many bad people in the legislature. There are a few of them, and usually they get called out. They will rise to the top, and things will happen. But by and large, the everyday person there who's been elected and they're there, I think they're there for the right reason and to do the right things. And most of them are people of faith, which is very interesting. Some of them very strong faith.
And very encouraging.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Brandy, will you share with us what you think your greatest accomplishment has been while you've been serving in the House?
Probably for me, I have spent the most of my time on education-related issues. I was not on the Education Committee my first 2 years there, but I asked to be on it and was placed on that committee. And the piece of legislation I'm most proud of was what's called House Bill 186. The state of Georgia had gotten to the point where all of our high school students were to be treated as if they were going to a 4-year college. That everybody had to be prepared when they graduated from high school to go to a major 4-year college. Well, that's a great goal and a great ambition, but it's just not realistic.
Yes.
What I wanted to do is I wanted to give all students an opportunity to get involved in something that they're interested in. And there's some students out there who are not going to 4-year colleges who can be great tradesmen.
Right.
They can be great plumbers. They can be great auto mechanics. They can do all those things that we must have. And it's the job future of the world that we're talking about. The future jobs are going to be like this. So I went and began to work with a lot of different people to put together a bill that would bring the career and technical education piece back to the forefront, so that if you have a student who, well, in the 9th grade, they'll be counseled and they'll pick a career pathway, something they're interested in. And they'll have an opportunity to take some courses in that. The goal being, if they get to the end of their high school career, they're ready to graduate and they don't particularly want to go to college, that will help them be prepared to either go to a technical college, like West Georgia Technical College, and take something in that field, or hopefully they would be ready to go into the workforce. They'll have the skills. So I think that was probably by far my best piece of legislation that will have the greatest impact, because it's going to do several things. One, the employers are asking for it. We held hearings around the state, and they were telling us, we need students who are ready to come into the workplace. They've got a certain set of skills, and they talked about soft skills as well. That's part of it, soft skills. How do you interact with other people? You know, do you know how to dress properly? Do you know you got to come to work on time? You know, all those type things which we don't usually think about.
Yes.
But they said we've got to have that. So we had input from, I think, the most important people out there, and that's the employer who is looking to hire this student when they graduate. So I think that's going to help get us ready and help our workforce develop, so we can bring in those jobs that we're trying to find for our people. Secondly, I think it's going to be tremendously valuable to the students. We have an unacceptably high dropout rate.
Yes.
And I believe that a lot of those students drop out because there's nothing that they're interested in school. Now, I always loved school. I was not a good math student, but I still was okay with it and could learn, and maybe you were the same. A lot of people were. But there's some students that academics are just not their thing. But they are technically inclined to do so many good things.
Yes.
That I want to get them into something they're interested in. And I believe sometimes if there's just 1 or 2 courses a day that they're really interested in, that they will stay in school and will get that degree. And that's what I hope and believe that piece of legislation will do. And that's why I think it's by far the most important thing I have sponsored and have passed.
Yes. And then, you know, when I went to school, I guess when you went to school, you could take vocational or you could take college. And I took vocational, but then I ended up going to college. So, you know, it really is good to prepare people for a job, because if you just go through school and are prepared for college, then you don't have the work experience when you get through.
And the good thing about this is when you and I were doing that, there was really a different track that you were on, and there was a stigma attached to the technical school. This is to erase that, because hopefully our best and brightest students who may be interested in a particular career path, they will get in that. Say they're interested in the health field, they're interested in becoming a doctor or a nurse or whatever. They know that they're going to have to go to college, but they can start in the 9th and 10th grade and take those health related courses to prepare them. So it's not going to be a track of your career and your college. It'll be a blend to bring those people together. And it's we want to maintain the rigor in the courses, but yet we want to have those things that will especially attract the interest of those who are not necessarily interested in just the academics.
Yes, and some 9th graders, I mean, they know what they want to do.
Sure.
When we were doing Teen Maze not so long ago, I was surprised at the number of teens who already knew they wanted to be a doctor or they wanted to be a nurse, you know. So, yeah, it comes pretty early.
It does, and one of the things that got me so interested in that, are you familiar with the program Junior Achievement that they do in the schools?
Yes.
I've done that a couple of times, and I was just absolutely amazed. One of the things that you do early on is you give them a 3x5 card and ask them to design a business card of what they would like to be when they get out of school.
Yes.
And I was just absolutely blown away with the thought process that they had and some of the creativeness that went into creating just that little 3x5 card. I mean, they put their heart and soul in it.
Yes.
And that told me if they're in the 9th and 10th grade, they're putting their heart and soul into that much, that if you give them the opportunity, that there's some good things that they can do that they're interested in, and we've got to get that interest and hold that interest until they mature enough to really decide what they want to do. But we can't let them drop out because there's nothing they're interested in.
Yes. And what about the next session? What do you see coming up in the next session, and what are the things you'd like to accomplish there?
Well, I think it's going to be another difficult session from a budget standpoint. We've had some increases in revenues. You've probably seen that in the paper. But the way our budget is designed, and we have to have a balanced budget. We're not free to borrow to fill in that. Thank goodness. I'm grateful for that. But a lot of the increase that we've got is already going in. We'll have to go into programs that grow on their own. Our education program. We've got new students. We've got increased costs there that will have to go. Healthcare is grown. The healthcare that the state provides. There's already a huge deficit there in the Medicaid part of it. So from that standpoint, the budget is going to be a huge part of the session, which it always is.
Yes.
People don't realize this, but the only thing that we are required to do as a legislature each session is to present a budget, pass a budget.
Huh.
That's really the only thing. Now, everything hinges around that budget, of course.
Yes.
So I think you're going to see the budget be a big issue again. Depending on the election, the national election, there's going to be a lot of issues to deal with, from health care and the things that are going on there to other programs that tie to so much of the federal dollars. We have our budget is made up of a certain amount of state revenue, but we get federal revenue as well. A significant amount of that's being cut, so it's going to create other places in there where we're going to have holes in the budget that are going to have to be filled. So there's going to be a lot of give and take. There'll be a lot of talk about, how do we do this? Do we continue to cut spending? Do we raise taxes? How do we go about doing that? And of course, there's extreme differences of opinion as to how we do that. So the budget will be, again, a huge part of the session, and the things that will be related to it, like the health care, Medicaid, and those will be very big parts. And some of it, like I say, hinges on the national election, some of the things going at the federal level. For me, as I said earlier, the thing I have been most interested in is education. And I have been meeting with and talking with some teachers, some administrators, and trying to find some ways to help our teachers get back to teaching. We have made education such a bureaucratic process that our classroom teacher, who is the one who really interacts with the student, in my opinion, is way overburdened with paperwork, with rules and regulations that have absolutely nothing to do with getting a child ready to become an adult. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're trying to get those children ready to be adults. We're trying to teach them, move them from the day they come in till the time hopefully they graduate, so that they'll be ready to go into the workforce. I'm trying to find some ways to help reduce those paperwork requirements, some of those regulations that they have. Let's face it, I doubt seriously we're going to be able to pay our teachers a whole lot more.
Yes.
But I've had a number of them tell me, if you can just make my life easier in the classroom, if you can help me get back to doing my first love, which is teaching children, then I can live with where I am paying benefits.
Yes, my daughter teaches, and I know she would love that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, if I could just teach my children.
Yeah.
But, I mean, she takes work home and on weekends and those kinds of things, and so that would be wonderful.
Well, it's something that I'm working on. I've got some other people helping me. Of course, I'm not an educator, so I have to get a lot of input. But we've got some momentum going to try to do some of those things.
Okay. And we have about 2 minutes, but I just want you to talk a little bit about the prayer group, the men's prayer group that you're involved in, and also I know that's your heart's desire to increase the number of men that come to that prayer group. So if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
That is one of the kind of the rocks of my life. We have a prayer group that meets at First Methodist every Friday morning at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
For any of you men who would like to come, we're open to everybody. We would love to have you come. But it's just a group of men who are concerned about their walk with the Lord. They're concerned about each other. They're concerned about their community. We come together. The first thing we do is we have prayer requests. We have a huge list of people we pray for.
Wow.
On a regular basis.
Yes.
And we pray for them by name, which is a little bit unusual. I mean, sometimes our prayer time may take 10 or 15 minutes to go through those names. So that is great. Then we have a short Bible study, a short devotional that we rotate among the members. I'll do it some of the other people do. To me, that is one of the things. We do it on 7 o'clock on Friday morning, and no matter what, I am going to be there if at all possible, because it's that important to me.
Yes.
And I believe that men taking a part and doing that, being part of a prayer group, it will make them better men, it will make them better husbands, it will make them better fathers, it will make them better members of the community. And I believe that God will always bless that. And I challenge any of the men out there who would be interested in that. You can call me and I'll tell you about it, but if you can find a men's group to get with and pray and study the Bible and serve the Lord, I believe your life will be enriched in ways I can't even describe to you.
Yes, because we impact so many things when we go into our prayer closet. And that's the way that we are most powerful and most far-reaching in what we do. So I would just like to encourage the men to get in touch with Randy and become a part of that prayer group and see your life enriched. And thank you for watching You Make the Difference.